Hello, welcome to VOW, Voices of Wisdom, the show that might not be for everybody, but everybody needs to watch this show. And I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. I have back today Honorable Gabrielle McDonald. She's my guest in here last show, and we're excited. We didn't finish everything, so we need to continue our conversation. Welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to bring everybody up if you did not see the other show, Gabrielle Kirk McDonald's distinguished career has spanned the globe. She has served as a civil rights lawyer, a law professor, a federal judge, and the president of the ICTY, which is the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslav. In all these roles, McDonald has shown a passion for justice and has used the role of law to combat injustice. She has a passion, a gut passion for what she does, and is in her heart and soul, and it's what protects people from anarchy. We're going to talk a little bit today more about your role as a civil rights lawyer. And I want to go back and perhaps maybe you can give us some samples of cases that you've had. And during that time, you explained in your other show, it was back in the 60s. And it was, it was the beginning or the turning of times, if you want to call it that. And it wasn't totally accepted at that time. So could you just give us a couple of stories of how you paved the way and how you just pushed forward to help out people during that time?
Well, it was the late 60s and early 70s into the mid 70s. As I said, when I left the Legal Defense Fund and moved to Houston, I married a Texan, and he was not interested in coming to New York. I don't know why, but I moved to Texas. I handled a number of cases. Primarily in the petrochemical industry, but also steel mills. I had a couple of cases against major steel mills, toured the steel mills. There was a kind of how do I put it, a pattern at that time where blacks were employed, at least sometimes, and I'm speaking of the petrochemical industry primarily, but they were employed in one line of progression, whites were employed in another. And usually the black employees' jobs would stop at, say, a grade level 5. The whites' entry level would start at 5 and go up to whatever, 12 or something. But very often they worked together, performing the same or interrelated tasks, but blacks were segregated to this line of progression. Well, when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, some of the companies recognized that this was illegal, and they said, fine, you may transfer over. We'll end the discrimination, you may transfer over. The problem was that in order to transfer over, you had to often have a high school diploma, and you had to pass the Wonderlic test.
And what is that?
It's a test of intelligence, but it wasn't predictive, and we filed many lawsuits challenging the test and the use of the test, basically saying that it was not predictive of job performance.
Understood.
So what the companies did was to institute new requirements to work in the very jobs from which blacks had been excluded. And yet you had a whole line of progression, a whole factory filled with persons doing these jobs who either didn't have a high school diploma or had not even taken this test. Further, if you transferred over, your seniority would begin anew, so that blacks who may have been employed in the lower paying labor type jobs for 10 years when they started over, their seniority for layoff purposes would begin anew. So they were reluctant to transfer over. But the unions were fighting against the carrying over of this seniority. So we would challenge both that seniority system as well as the institution of new requirements to work in jobs. And that was the pattern. And you could win one lawsuit against one company, and that wouldn't make a difference with the other companies. So it was almost as if you had to file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Airlines, I didn't see any black flight attendants. I remember when one hired its first flight attendant. I had a client, a woman, who was working for this airlines in another capacity and wanted to become a flight attendant, and they denied her that position. You know, the employer wouldn't say, we're denying you that position because of your race, but that kind of case. The gas company, the light company, you name it. We filed lawsuits against all of them in Houston. When I went to Houston and in East Texas, you know, borders Louisiana, a major glass company in Lake Charles, Louisiana. It was, you know, people like to say, well, that was the Southwest. I don't know whether that was the Southwest so much as the South. I found conditions in Houston to be very similar to those that existed in Mississippi. And of course, everyone gives Mississippi the bum rap, and that is the place where the worst discriminators are. That wasn't the case. So it was just one lawsuit after another lawsuit, challenging systemic, entrenched practices.
Right. There was a story you mentioned one time about the American fishermen case.
Well, that was when I became a federal judge. In 1979, I became a judge. In 1981, a dispute arose between the American fishermen and Vietnamese fishermen. The American fishermen had an organization basically called the American Fishermen, and a dispute ensued basically over shrimp fishing. You know, there's a limited number of shrimp in the bay, and there was this controversy. But the American fishermen then brought in the Ku Klux Klan and to assist them. And the Ku Klux Klan burned crosses, burned boats, shrimping boats owned by Vietnamese. They conducted a flotilla down a canal outside of Galveston, intimidating the Vietnamese fishermen, discouraging them from partaking in their trade. So a lawsuit was filed on behalf of the Vietnamese fishermen by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is located in Alabama, and it's one of the things that they do is they have kind of a Klan watch.
I see.
And so they filed a lawsuit. The Attorney General for Texas then intervened in the lawsuit, alleging that the Klan was maintaining a paramilitary camp, which they were, because I was later shown films with the Klan running through the woods, you know, engaging in paramilitary training activities. Well, the case fell into my court. There were 8 judges, and when you filed a complaint, a card was selected, and the judge, it was to be a random selection. Well,
I see.
I was selected randomly, supposedly, and the Klan was not very happy, so they filed a motion that I recuse myself, saying that all Negroes disliked the Klan and that they couldn't get a fair trial before me. But the test is not that. The test is whether I, as a judge, had made any statements or engaged in any what is called extrajudicial bias. So had I said something, had I done something, and I hadn't. So I refused to recuse myself, and it was not appealed. They did not appeal it, I believe, because there was no basis. You know, you're not entitled to a judge of your choice. You're entitled to a judge who will give you a fair trial.
Absolutely.
So regardless of what the judge looks like, The question is, will you get a fair trial? And so you have to demonstrate that the judge is biased because of prior actions of the judge. I did not recuse myself. I relied in part on a case that had been decided by Judge Motley in New York, who was the first African-American federal judge, first African-American woman federal judge. And she had a case, it was a sex discrimination case against a law firm. And they sought her recusal, saying that because she was a woman, she would be biased in favor of the plaintiffs who were women. And basically what she wrote was, if I am biased because of my gender, and I'm biased in favor of the plaintiffs who are women, then what about my fellow judges who are men? Are they biased in favor of the employer and against the women? She did not recuse herself. So the same principle applied, and I did not recuse myself. It was difficult. There were difficult times, though. I remember we didn't have metal detectors in the federal buildings at that time, but they installed one at the entrance to my courtroom, and I had 2 law clerks, and in addition to the metal detector, I told one, you watch one side of the courtroom, the other, you watch the other side, and I will just keep my eyes on everyone.
So let me understand, they installed that just because of that case?
Because of fears for, and of course I was under all kinds of security and
Threats?
a lot of threats. We received, my husband received 4 one-way bogus tickets to Africa, and a target, you know, when people shoot guns, they shoot at a target. Well, this target was a profile of a black person running, and that was troublesome to me, to say that troublesome is a very mild word, because I had 2 children, and so there were 4 tickets, which means that someone knew that I had 2 children. And so I ruled against the Klan, and I ruled for the Attorney General of the state of Texas, and we closed the paramilitary camp. And I had a lot of high-profile cases, a case involving a commissioner, criminal case, and he waived the jury trial, and he tried it to me. I found him not guilty. So many high-profile cases. Sometimes I doubted that the assignments were random.
Wow. So let's talk now about your international status, where you are now, what are you doing now? I think it's just profound that people really don't know about this, and I think it's important that we talk about what you're doing now and where you are.
Well, it's important, I suppose it's important for other people young people who come after me.
Absolutely.
They need to understand that I've been there and other people have been there, that it is, there's no mystery about it. As I say when I talk with young people, I want to demystify, so to speak, this whole process. I am now a judge with the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal, which is located in The Hague, the Netherlands. It's a tribunal composed of 9 arbitrators or judges, 3 from the U.S., 3 from Iran, and 3 from other countries. And we resolve claims growing out of the hostage crisis. I mean, claims that from 1979, 80, 81, that arose because of after the revolution, many companies were taken over by Iran, and the United States had other conflicts with Iran, and we resolved just monetary claims. And I have been there since November of 2001. Before that, I was with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which was and it still is in existence, in The Hague. It was established by the Security Council of the United Nations, and it tried persons for crimes committed during the war in the former Yugoslavia that went on between 1992 and 1995. There were 11 judges there when I joined. I was elected by the United Nations. My name was submitted by the United States. Each country who's a member of the United Nations could submit a name.
Right.
It was then voted on. And I was one of the 11 judges to be elected. I presided over the first trial, which was really the first trial since the Nuremberg trials.
Wow.
And I subsequently was elected president and served in that capacity until 1999. And it was an exhilarating experience.
How
you know,
so?
many people said to me, I was living in Houston at the time, and I had friends who said, why are you going over there? You know, and I even had friends who were involved in the civil rights movement here in the United States saying, why are you concerned about those rights? We've got a lot of unfinished business in the United States. So it shows you how people sometimes want to pigeonhole you.
Right.
So, and civil rights is nothing more, or human rights really, is nothing more than civil rights on an international level. So I've always been adventuresome, shall I say, and I felt very honored and saw it as a great opportunity, really as a confluence of the time I spent as a judge, because I was selected, I think, because of my experience as a federal judge where I handled criminal cases, and my time as a law professor, and my time as a civil rights attorney, where I haven't lost that passion. You know, as I say, it's something in my gut. It's something visceral.
Yes.
And I felt the same way about the issues that we were called upon to handle. But it was a difficult time. The testimony was very graphic. But you feel that you're contributing. You feel that you're doing something to help the healing process. And it wasn't that very different than what I did as a civil rights attorney, even though I was acting as a lawyer and as a partisan, so to speak. I had that kind of sensitivity that I never really lost.
Could you explain a little bit in more detail for our audience what that really meant in that capacity? What did you do? Maybe give an example, just for us to really get an understanding. I like to be informative and educational, you know.
Yeah.
So I want to give a little bit more detail, if you can.
Well, there's something that's referred to as the Nuremberg principle, and it comes from the trials after World War II, where Nazis were tried by the Nuremberg Tribunal, which was a multinational tribunal. It wasn't really international like our tribunal was, but it was limited to, it drew its judges from the states that had won the war. But the theory was that you could help to stop this cycle of violence and retribution if you tried individuals for crimes and established the notion that it's individuals that commit crimes and not groups of people. Because this cycle of retribution, this is what you did to my cousin, this is what you did to my uncle, and therefore I'm going to do that to you. It just carries on. And so the thought was, you need to focus on individuals and not their group identity.
I see.
So that was the theory behind the establishment of our War Crimes Tribunal and the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal, that the Security Council actually found that the establishment of a court would, one, help to stop the commission of the violence, and two, help to establish a lasting peace. And that is for people to understand that they receive justice. And if they receive justice, that they would not, in the next generation, want to carry on this retribution and this retaliation. So It's a legal principle, but in a sense, it's social justice, and that's what we did. The court was located far away from the former Yugoslavia. It couldn't be located in the former Yugoslavia because of the violence that was ongoing when the tribunal was established. After our tribunal was established, a tribunal for Rwanda was also
I
established.
see.
And that tribunal was located in, or it still is, in Arusha, Tanzania, and appeals from the Rwanda tribunal go to the appellate court for the Yugoslav tribunal. In other words, they have a joint appellate court. But of course, in Rwanda, the genocide there was just unimaginable. I mean, there were 800,000 persons who were slaughtered in a period of 3 months in 1994.
800,000. I don't think we really understand.
800,000, that's almost 1 million. And they were killed not, the Holocaust was through gas. These people were killed with machetes primarily. And to kill 800,000 people in a 3-month period. And again, the theory was end this cycle between the Hutus and the Tutsis.
Right.
And when I was president, I visited a genocide site in Rwanda, and I thought my job as the president of the tribunal would be to lay a wreath, and instead I was taken through what had been turned into a museum, but it was room after room of a former school filled with skeletons. Deborah, I mean, and I was surprised. And I was shown all of this by the government of Rwanda, and primarily Tutsis. And, as president or as a judge, even when I was trying cases in the UN, I mean, in the Hague with the UN tribunal, you want to keep this stiff upper lip,
Yeah.
And I have photographs of me visiting room after room, and I am gray. I really am. I'm gray. And I held it back until we left. We had come in a helicopter, and there were children around playing when we landed and when we left. And when I looked down and saw these kids waving, and then this is within feet of the museum, I just lost it. I say I didn't cry. It just came from my body. But the violence that we see there is horrific, and there are many ways to deal with it. But I've spent the last 20 years, I guess, being involved in international courts.
So right now you go back and forth, and how
Yes,
does that work? How does that work now? Could you explain?
Well, I'm no longer with the War Crimes Tribunal. I'm with the Iran U.S. Claims Tribunal, which is primarily an arbitration tribunal.
Okay.
So the 9 of us really are there to assist the parties in hearing their claims. And I was there last month, and I go back in May, and then I'll go back in June. And we sit together as 9 of us, and we hear those cases.
So where do those cases come from?
Well, those are claims that are either brought by the United States against Iran or Iran against the United States. The private claims have been resolved, but for example, during the reign of the Shah, the United States was an ally of Iran. And so the Shah bought military equipment from the United States. Well, after the revolution, that changed. And so there are claims for compensation for that military equipment. So it's all financial. And it's difficult, but it's a different animal, so to speak, than the Yugoslav tribunal. What is important, I think, about the Iran U.S. Claims Tribunal is that the Iranians seized the United States Embassy in 1979. And that could have erupted into war, but it didn't. The parties got together and through Algeria negotiated an agreement to resolve their claims peacefully. So that again is an important development. It just moves slowly, that's for certain.
So your case is, so just to make me understand and for our audience to understand, so a case is brought before you and the 9 of you sit down, because you don't actually have a person there.
Well, the case is, it's a claim. It would be a written claim.
Right.
And then if it's, say Iran files a claim, United States responds, and then they go back and forth filing memorials. And it's very paper intensive.
That's what I thought.
With the invoices, et cetera. But when it's ready for a hearing, the parties then appear before us and they argue or they offer witnesses. But it is not open to the public. Because they're really private arbitrations. And so we hear testimony, but primarily there are legal presentations like you would see in an appellate court, where the lawyers stand at the podium and basically read their presentations. We hear from witnesses, we hear from accountants. It can be tedious, I must admit.
So it's
I
good to get a
prefer to
break.
be more involved
Right.
and to relate more rather than listening to presentations being made. But it's an important alternative dispute resolution tool, shall we say.
Well, we have about 20 seconds left.
Oh, my.
Time flies.
And it sounds like I have been talking
It's just
the whole
been
time.
awesome. And, you know, I want everybody to know who Judge Gabrielle McDonald is. Google her some more if you need some more information. But most importantly, this is Women's Month, and I'm honored to have had her on my show. And we've had information and education and also controversial information that we've talked about. And thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Coming on my show.
You're welcome.
This is Val, Voices of Wisdom, and I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. And thank you for viewing my show.